So a huge thank you to Janelle and Haima for inviting me and thinking my story was worth telling. I've been honored, flattered, humbled to this moment. So when I heard the theme, Girls Run the World, I was all over it because it's true. Girls have ambition, intelligence, sensitivity, passion, creativity. I could go on all night with the adjectives. So I was starting to think about what was it about my story that I might want to share. And then thankfully, Haima figured out I needed some hand-holding, and she sent me some prompts to consider. So I want to share them with you because then they're going to shape how I talk to you this evening. So they were similar to what Jody just described. Examples of any discrimination I faced because of my gender, the differences between men and women in my field, triumphs I've had, my journey as a teacher, and my experience as a young girl. So this is my honest attempt to respond boldly and honestly. Now that I'm looking at you, I might be oversharing, but you'll let me know later. So before I jump in, just in terms of some context, over the years recently, I've come to learn that sharing your story is probably one of the most powerful tools that we have. My colleagues actually at Crossroads and I, we've been reading a lot about, we've been talking about how sharing stories does three things. It provides mirrors, windows, and doorways. So first you need to hear or read stories that are mirrors. They're like a way to see yourself, value your own experience, and be reminded that you're not the only one going through whatever it is you're going through. But then you also need to hear and read stories that serve as windows. So kind of a glimpse into the lives of others, right? There's different ways to grow up and to live your life, and it helps to see that through these windows. And then hopefully, by hearing both the mirrors and the windows, it leads you or us to a doorway that kind of puts us out of our familiar, out of our comfort zone, and gets us to seek new experiences. And hopefully what all this does, which is kind of going to be the punchline in a lot of what I tell this evening, is that going through those doorways increases diversity and helps us seek out the commonalities that bind us as opposed to the differences and the excuses that constantly divide us. And so that philosophy kind of is my story, but I'm still going to go through all the stages that Haima will walk me through, and hopefully you guys will come to the same conclusion that I have. So starting as a young girl, and then I'm going to work my way up. So, young, white, Jewish, only child, 2 college-educated parents, growing up in Manalapan, which is about a half an hour from here. I was raised with that girls can do anything attitude. I was born in the early 70s, so my formative years were kind of in the 80s. And as I recall it, probably similar to what you just described, I knew something was going on, but I probably couldn't put my finger on it. There was some gaining ground and increasing presence of women in the workplace. And even though I was a kid, I had this sense that important advancements were being made. In terms of my own role models in my own family, my mom had a series of jobs. My dad had a career. In fact, it was education, which I also now think is kind of hereditary and runs in families, but that's something else. So for me, there was never a doubt in my upbringing that school was a top priority, that I was going to college. I was told to have my own career so I wouldn't have to rely on a man to get what I needed. And I'm guessing that's because also in the 80s, the divorce rate was creeping up, and it was just something that women told little girls quite a bit. So over that same time, I got to try it all. I played soccer, the piano, the guitar, the clarinet. I took a binary computer course, I went to dance class, I went to Hebrew school. Clearly I didn't really pursue all of those, they were just towing the water. But the two that really stuck for me personally happen to have been dance. I went every year from when I was 3 to 18, even went to a magnet program in performing arts for 1 year of high school, true. And Hebrew school kind of connected with me, which might have been the teacher thing. Even when I was in high school, I went there, I worked on the attendance, I tutored kids. I even liked to go, as we got older, there were classes with the rabbi as a teenager, and you would get to discuss and debate stories about ethics and morals, and I just liked that environment. So far, probably to most of you, my story is pretty predictable, fairly straightforward. But what I want to spend a minute talking about is one of the most transformative moments in my life. It set me on a path that I know I follow to this day. It relates back to that idea of mirrors, windows, and doorways. And this might be the oversharing. In the 8th grade, I went to a party with one of my girlfriends. She was white, fellow cheerleader. She had older siblings who were like really partying with their friends. And although I knew a lot of people there, I personally was uncomfortable. I didn't like the way my peers were socializing, which included drinking and flirting. So one of my close male football player friends asked me if I wanted to walk a few blocks to another party that he had to attend. Looking for a reason to leave, I said yes. He was one of the captains of the football team, the wrestling team, he was in advanced math, he was in honors English, and so we walked to the next party so he could make his appearance. The vibe there was completely different from where we came. There were generations of family and friends. They were dancing, eating, laughing. There was no underage drinking, there wasn't inappropriate flirting, so we made our rounds and returned back to the first party where we had the majority of our mutual friends. So at the first party, my friend was the only black person, and at the second party, I was the only white person. It was my first time being in an environment where I wasn't the majority. And it was a true aha moment. Like I said, I could put myself there in this moment, and it's many years ago. And all of a sudden I realized what it was like for him every day in our school and around our town. And I was also aware that by me being the other, it didn't stop me from feeling a level of comfort at the second party that I didn't share with people who looked like me at the first party. I call it transformational because it clearly marked a trajectory for me and shaped who I am and who I've become and who I am. It helped change the way I view the world, its diversity, its norms, its expectations. To this day, I encourage everybody I know to look for the others in the room, no matter what room you're in. Try to see things from multiple and diverse opinions, from perspectives. Being both the majority and the minority can help you gauge the reactions of others, it strengthens your empathy, and it raises our collective level of consciousness. So back to the journey as an educator, which is also tightly related to this story. Graduated from high school, went to George Washington University in DC. I'd grown up in the suburbs of New Jersey, and although I wanted a city school, there was something about Washington, DC that just felt manageable. My major was psychology, my minor was cross-cultural anthropology, and again, the party story made me increasingly curious about how and why people in groups were who they were. So I think that's how I kind of came to study those two things. My first jobs at college were just that. They were ways to get some spending money. I worked at the mall, I worked at a law firm, but it wasn't until I had a professor where I had an opportunity in college to work on a research project that documented the experiences of urban students in both DC and in New York City. And again, I found myself increasingly drawn to the field of education. But being the daughter of an educator, I knew I was never going to work in a school. I figured I was either going to do like grassroots, community-based organization or top-down policy work, because both of those were real prevalent in DC. So the next few jobs and internships I had were kind of related to those interests and set me on that path. I mentored a girl in an after-school community center. I worked in a national office called Aspida, which was the only Hispanic organization dedicated exclusively to the education and leadership of Hispanic youth. And upon graduation, I got a job. It was secretarial. I was the administrative assistant, but it was in the national office of this big acronym that stood for the Interstate New Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium. Bottom line, it was a group of people from all over the country. They convened around issues of new teachers, how they got their licenses, what tests they took, what kind of support they needed as internships as they started in their careers. Being in DC, I was lucky. I got to work with some of the top researchers, top policymakers in the country. And by showing an interest and by being dedicated to my work, Eventually, I made my way out of the secretarial managerial tasks and into more the substance of the work. And after 5 years of sitting and listening to all these great people talk about all these great ideas, I was hungry. I wanted to experience teaching for myself, especially if I was going to be an informed member of this community. Like, I had to do it. So I started looking around for programs that train teachers. And I had a colleague, a black woman, who suggested I look at Howard. Howard University is a historically black college in DC. In fact, it's the first. So, I was still the white, only child, Jewish, all the things I told you before. So I was kind of surprised when she mentioned it. But she stood firmly by her recommendation. She knew I wanted to teach in a city. According to her, Howard was just developing a strong program. She was friends with the new dean who was there. And she told me, although all schools say that they educate all children, she just had this feeling that I would get a deeper perspective and commitment to urban education by attending Howard. So I told her I'd go meet with the dean, and needless to say, I liked what I heard, I applied, and was accepted. While I was there, again, historically black college, so I'm the other, all of my peers just assumed I had to be someone else. Right back then, I probably got a little tanner than I do now too, but I was either Hispanic or Middle Eastern or light-skinned, or I had to be mixed with something. Like, to them, there was no way that I could be so comfortable, so passionate about the work in the community if I wasn't part of the community. But again, just like that 8th grade party experience, there was new learning for me and new learning for my peers. And for all of us, it widened the range of experience and networking that we all got to be a part of. So I taught in DC for 5 years, and I fell in love with schools, which again, shouldn't surprise most of you in this room. Even to this day, I find joy in teaching and learning every day. A colleague once called teaching an art, a science, a craft, and a calling. So my message in this part, whatever it is you do, find it and love it. Love what you do and do that. So I was teaching in a 4th grade classroom across the river from the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001. And after 14 years of schooling, living and working in DC, and that tragic national event, I just had a desire, a nagging to come home to New Jersey. Right as I was getting ready to do that, apply for a job, start packing boxes, I got a call from a colleague from the first big policy job that I had. He was transferring from Kansas to DC, and he was going to be in charge of teacher licensing and certification for DC public schools, which is kind of the equivalent here of the New Jersey State Department of Education. So as a teacher, I'm going to tell you, it's not often that you get tapped on the shoulder to go work somewhere else big like that. So I accepted the offer. I kind of deferred my New Jersey thing, thinking this was something I needed to do. And I worked there for a year, loved it, but that gnawing, that desire to return to New Jersey was still kind of pulling me home. So in September 2003, here I arrived in South Brunswick. I was a 1st grade teacher at Brunswick Acres. My tenure in South Brunswick has included teaching 1st grade, 1st through 5th grade as instructional support, Title I. I tend to find students whose challenges are keeping up with grade level standards, opening those doors for them, finding ways to increase opportunity and access. Again, at some point I got that itch, let me just get the supervisor certificate, the principal certificate. You never know, because probably not going to get tapped on the shoulder like I did in DC, so maybe I have to do some things to get myself ready. And I've been lucky. I got the certification. I was the assistant principal of Brunswick Acres in Greenbrook. I had this other supervisory job that put me through K-8 for a number of years, and I'm happy to be reporting that I'm in my 4th year serving as one of the APs, as you know, at Crossroads North. So everything that I've shared so far, I know, I recognize, I have been fortunate, blessed, sheltered, advantaged, privileged. I haven't experienced blatant discrimination, or if I have, I've been too naive to identify it or too proud to acknowledge it. In terms of the differences between men and women, I also work in a female-dominated field. Like, I looked up the statistics for you, so according to the National Center for Education Statistics, and again, from all of your collective experiences, you probably won't be surprised to hear these numbers. 76% of teachers are female. 52% are principals. So I have to say, in South Brunswick, we're a little ahead of that, because I counted. There's 10 schools, 3 of them have male principals, the other 7 have female, so we're beating the national average. Statistically, 78% of people who work in central office are female, but I found the glass ceiling. It's superintendents. They're only 14%. So there is a level of hierarchy where you meet that. However, that's not my path. Even when I've been lucky, I've been encouraged to apply for principalships. I've even been offered some principalships. I've declined them because I know myself, and I think knowing yourself is also, I hope, one of the themes that you get out of today. I love what I do, where I do it, who I do it for, but for me right now, I'm a good right-hand man. I'm a good right-hand woman. I don't want or need the buck to stop with me. I'm accountable, I'm responsible, I'm diligent, but I still haven't found out the right way to balance my homework and my work with my kids and my family, and so I'm not looking right now to take on even more of that. In fact, many people will even often hear me joke that my next job is going to have less homework because I come home with a big book bag every night. So with that, I mean, over the years, I've been aware of my commitment to education. My personal bias is that teaching is the most important profession because it's the foundation of everything else that all of you will do and do. And for me, what could have been a story tonight of kind of sheltered privilege, I hope has been one about seeking out and understanding. I do check myself. I want to make sure that my easy life hasn't come at the expense of others. So I look for opportunities and access. I try to bring people with me. I'm constantly trying to reflect, adjust, make sure that I'm being as inclusive as possible, as sensitive as possible, and being aware that there are, more than one way to do this kind of work. So with that, I want to thank you for letting me share my story, and I hope one day that you guys share yours and that I'm here to hear it. So thank you guys.